Hey guys, I'm Natalie Gray, and this is The Gray Escape. And this episode, possibly above all other episodes of this show, is going to require that you have a very open mind. I'll tell you why right after this. Today's guest died. Luckily for this podcast, she came back to life, and she's going to share with us today not only the details of her near-death experience, but how an addiction to meth led to a life-changing awakening that rivals my own in its incredibleness. I know it's not a word, but maybe it is now. Incredibleness. Jessa Reed is a talented comedian and former meth addict who in 2000 had a near-death experience that changed her life. Maybe you've already seen her on Comedy Central, or perhaps you listen to her very successful podcast, The Mormon and the Meth Head. Jessa is the first person who I've had on this podcast who, like myself, had a near-death experience that revealed what may be tremendous insights into everything from the nature of reality, the universe, if we're in a program, and if so, how do we hack it, and basically what the frack is going on. If it's there to go, in this episode, we go there. And again, I really preface this show with the disclaimer, keep an open mind. Now, if you're listening to this show, you probably have one already, and that's a good thing. My friend, fellow comedian and podcaster and psychic explorer, Karen Rontowski, referred me to Jessa, and we literally met right here, right now for this show. So join me on this incredible journey of incredibleness that begins with switching on the microphone with Miss Jessa Reed. Just start recording and then we can get to know each other in a podcast episode because we've just met.
Yeah,
by our.
You have come up in conversations with multiple people.
Oh, really?
Though, because I think Natasha Pearl Hansen did the intro, right? I feel like we were introduced to each other in a Facebook group message with Natasha Pearl Hansen. But then I was with Karen Rontowski recently, who I think when I did her episode told me that I needed to meet you.
I see, yes.
Or shortly thereafter, and then I saw her again. She just did our podcast, and you came up several times. I'll have to look. I'm almost positive that's who the intro was.
For me, Karen Rontowski came on my podcast because clearly it's very incestuous and everybody just goes on a podcast and makes sure everyone they know is on the same podcast. And she was like, you got to meet my friend Jessa Reed. You got to meet Jessa Reed. And I then went to research you online, and you are so funny.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're really seriously funny. Like, executives out there listening, you are sitcom material. I mean,
thank you very much. Thank you.
I was super impressed. And then we spoke briefly, and you said in an email, we're cut from the same cloth.
Yes.
Now, I don't want to give any spoilers away to this episode because I know there's certain points we're going to hit, but I'm extremely curious of how we are cut from the same cloth, knowing your backstory. So
maybe not. Maybe don't play the same characters in the thing, but I do think we are cut from the same energetic cloth.
So talk about that. Like, that's really interesting then. So
I'm trying to think. I believe that I was told that we have a similar near-death experience story.
Okay. Well, I definitely have a near-death experience story, and I actually don't know. I just know the high points of your story that are, the headline news kind of when you Google you on the internet.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear about your near-death experience.
So from a young age, I felt... very young, I felt like I was watched. Like I lived on a stage and was watched by people in the sky. And I remember I was well into my teens before I started. When I got dressed, I would turn off the lights and change my clothes because I just felt like a sim, I guess.
Wow.
Almost just like none of the ceilings or the sky were real, and there were just beings watching. And that was just a sensation I had my entire childhood.
Wow.
I remember when I got to the age where you start finding out that Santa isn't real and that magic isn't real and all these things. None of that resonated with me. I felt very disillusioned and disappointed, but not in a way that I think normal kids do. I started to feel like either I was being lied to or that everyone else was wrong. Just didn't feel right. So the older I got, the more kind of disillusioned I got with this version of reality that was fed to me. It just never sat right. I went through at like 15, 14, I guess, 13, started looking into like paranormal things, ESP, astral projection. There wasn't internet. I'm almost 42. So we didn't have the internet yet. And so I'm reading in like Time Life books. And I'm like, this seems more real to me than this thing that you're telling me life is. And I just became a seeker, started looking for an answer. I did a few years in Christianity because I felt like I had a one experience with a higher power or something. And I was like, it was with Christians. And I was like, okay, is it Jesus? And then the further I got into that organization, the further away from what I was looking for. I felt like it was very outwardly focused, felt more fake than just the regular 9-to-5 rat race that I didn't resonate with. I started doing stand-up comedy when I was 21, and at 22, I got addicted to meth. I did meth once.
Now, who did you get introduced to this by another person? How does that happen that someone takes it for the first time?
I already partied pretty hard, as a 21-year-old would on the road doing stand-up. I thought I was doing coke, and I just was trying to do a little bit of coke because it sobers you up from the alcohol. And I was really just kind of doing it so that I could not have a hangover the next day. And it was what meth was back then was something called crank.
So you were already doing cocaine,
I'd already
pretty casually
done a coke phase. So
Okay.
I was already over cocaine by
I
this.
see.
Because my life was like my parents were addicts. I was like hyper exposed to a lot of things at a young age. I was dropped out of school at 15, married to a pastor's kid at 16 after getting pregnant, had a child, was already separated and working on a divorce by 21 and was doing stand-up. So I'd already 20 to 21 was my coke phase.
Wow.
I grew up around drugs, and so this wasn't crazy for me to be doing a line, and nor was I really interested in coke at that point. It changed my life immediately. For the first time, I felt, and I don't think I articulated this in the moment when I look back and think what about that grabbed me so fast? I felt smart. I felt like I was a part of. I felt like I could find the curtain that I was looking for. And this was never conscious thoughts, I never thought man, I'm really disillusioned with this reality that I live in. It just felt like a CD that was skipped. It just felt like it wasn't quite right. I got dropped off here is really what it felt like. I felt foreign. I felt like I spoke a different language. I felt like I saw things differently than everyone else did. And on meth, I felt like everything synced up for the first time ever.
Wow.
And I felt like I'll find it. I'll find the thing I'm looking for. I'll find the curtain. Everything looked and seemed very fake and pretend in a way that was more surreal. Kind of how psychedelics, I don't know if you've ever done psychedelics, but psychedelics, sometimes on mushrooms, the world can look like a movie set. And I think in day-to-day life, it kind of already felt that way to me, but I felt like something was wrong with me. I felt like the world is this thing that everyone thinks it is, and there's just something with me that I can't flourish in it. I can't adapt to it. And on meth, I felt like, oh no, this is what the world actually is, and now I can just see it more clearly.
Wow. I have never done psychedelics, but I've had an interest in them. I've had an interest in them since my near-death experience because of the correlations with sort of seeing the truth and all this sort of stuff. I only ever watched a documentary on meth is my exposure to meth, which was the whole Not Even Once, that apparently it's the most addictive substance going, basically.
I feel like I would say that about opiates just because you also have to deal with the physical addiction. But yes, I think it was once. That was it. I knew at the end of that I would do this drug every day for the rest of my life.
Oh my gosh.
It didn't feel negotiable, and there was no part of me that resisted that because I would rather live my life in this where everything feels like it's on the right frequency than to go back and be a stranger in a foreign land.
That is terrifying.
It is.
Terrifying.
I have a list. I'm pretty pro like psychedelics, pretty anti-alcohol. But there's like a list of drugs that I say, this is a potential life sentence. You do this once. And I personally wouldn't trade my time on meth for anything because it's when my whole life changed. However, I know a lot of people that have done meth, and I'm the only one that says that. So I don't recommend it.
No.
I think this was
good.
Yeah. I am not an advocate for meth. My experience, I think, was something that needed to happen for me. My mother was a meth addict when I was a kid. I think I never would have forgiven her if I didn't go out and stand in her shoes for a little while. So that had a lot to do with that.
And do you know, out of interest, her story, how she was introduced to it?
She just was an addict and did a lot of drugs, and that just ended up being her drug of choice. She was a lot more of what I would call a dumpster, someone that could do any drug, where once I did meth, that's all, like that was my focus.
And are you still in touch with your mom? Like, do you have a relationship?
Yeah, she's my nanny. Now she takes care of my kids while I do comedy and stuff.
So somehow she managed to get off
She
drugs.
got clean before I started using.
Okay.
And then we got to kind of switch roles. And it was very healing for us to play both sides of that.
Right.
And we were able to forgive each other and move on.
Is she, I'm guessing there's probably quite a tight age gap between you guys. Did she have
22
you young?
years.
22 years.
Which is, back then, not crazy.
No.
But, and then I had my daughter at 17, and my mom, my grandmother had my mom at 17 years.
Wow.
So yeah, we're all relatively close together.
Pretty tight. Yeah. Can you describe, and this sounds like some sort of very deviantly like morbid question, but when you take meth, how do you even describe how you feel?
I think it manifests differently for different people too. Something I was just talking about on our podcast is I hate opiates. I hate pain medicine. Like I just had implants put in my mouth, and I hated the medicine so bad that I would almost rather be in the pain than take the pain meds.
Wow.
They make me dizzy and drowsy and nauseous and everything. But people who are meant to be addicted to opiates are like, no, they give me energy. They make me think. They do all these things. So for me, meth felt like it leveled me out. Meth felt like, I was going faster, but there's a part of me that's screaming to go faster all the time. And so I felt like it helped that. For a lot of people, it manifests in scary ways. It's almost like their fears come to haunt them. They feel like they're being chased by shadow people. They feel like there's things burrowing through their skin. They do a lot of destructive things to their body. My theory was that whatever demons you have to face inside of you, meth will bring them to the forefront. And so I was very comfortable in a world where not everything fit into our perception of reality. So I saw the shadows and they didn't scare me. I didn't feel like I needed to run from them. I wasn't paranoid. I didn't have, if my skin itched, I just knew my skin itched. I didn't feel like I needed to cut it. So I think it's different for everyone. I mean, I have ADHD or whatever. So like Ritalin or Adderall or whatever didn't ever have that crazy high effect on me. It just kind of had that leveling out. But it's euphoric also. And a lot of the things that happen as a result of the poor diet and sleep deprivation.
I see. And so how long does it last in your system?
A very long time. So you stay high, depending on how you do it and how long you've been doing it, you stay high a lot longer than something like Coke, where your body breaks Coke down very fast, where you're high for 4 to 8 hours on meth.
And so when you come down after that very first time, are you already craving more of it? Like, is it that fast, the addiction, or do you kind of come down and you're a bit normal again but things seem boring?
I know plenty of people who did it for a weekend, and I know plenty of people who did it for several weekends. I know people who do it part-time now. I don't think they are, I don't assume that you'll be that kind of person.
No.
I personally knew 3 hours into the high, like this is just what I'll do from now on. So I think a lot of people, when they first become addicted to a substance, they spend time lying to themselves about whether or not they'll be able to control it. I didn't have any interest in doing any of that. It's just like, I'll do this.
And where did you, I guess you were already procuring sort of illegal substances, so you already had a hookup to just one day say, hey, can I have some of this? So you had a supply sort of chain in place. It wasn't difficult for you to continue this then?
Yeah, no, I tried it the first time on the road, but I lived in Portland, which had a huge meth community. And then I was a part of like the after hours scene already. Because most of the comedians, not so much comedians, but like people in bands, service industry people who like bartended and stuff, kind of had this like community where there were like speakeasies essentially, like after hours.
Right.
And I already hung out at those when I was in town. And of course there were people selling meth there. So I already knew who to talk to. And so I just, when I got back, was like, I would like more of this, please.
So everything was very easy. It's so scary, you know? And so there you are, 21, when you tried it for the first time and you knew it was going to be this life-changing thing. And you seem sort of so positive about it. You're probably the only person on the planet, I agree, who has this radiant sort of buoyancy of like, yeah, I did meth and it changed my life. Like, I've never been exposed to anybody's attitude like this. So how does the positive stuff come into it?
My podcast partner says I'm made out of effervescent Teflon. Just because if you hear me recall any era of my life, there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of bad things, but just kind of my overall life philosophy is that I don't believe that anything happens that I didn't on a higher level
manifest,
choose to experience. So that's where the near-death experience comes in.
Right.
I just go full into meth addiction. I leave my daughter with family. I disappear. My family thinks I'm dead intermittently in this like 5.5 years. In 2000, early 2000, I have a near-death experience that we'll say was drugs. I don't exactly know. But I die in a dance club, foam at the mouth, urinate on myself, have to be carried out, taken to the hospital. The hospital is told that I have overdosed on drugs, and so they were less than vigilant about bringing me back.
Wow.
I feel like I was just being poked by a stick. Like when I came to, the doctor was an ass.
Wow.
And I asked how I died, and she said, drug overdose. And I said, what drug? And she said, I don't know, your friend said you were on drugs. Like they hadn't run blood work or anything. And I stole the paperwork, and the paperwork just said, does not respond to painful stimuli, for just like lines and lines.
Whoa.
So I don't know. I wish I had stayed and asked for like, how long was I out? Was I brain dead? You know, I would like to know all of this, but I can't. And they also had me in under Jane Doe Foxtrot. And I couldn't even tell you a hospital I was at. I was picked up by friends. While I was gone, I went to, the day that I died, I was counseling a fellow party goer, and who was crying over her boyfriend, who happened to be my recently ex-boyfriend. Okay. And this asshole that I was counseling was supposedly my best friend. So this was already like, I'm helping people that, you know, my ego does not want to help. And I kept telling her that her issues were an illusion and that nothing outside of her, good or bad, could affect her unless she chose to let it affect her. Like that she was making the decision how to interpret these things that were happening to her, which is bumper sticker material in 2019. But this was groundbreaking shit in 2000. Yeah. To the extent to which, as I'm saying it, first of all, I have no idea where this is coming from. And I'm like, because I'm not this kind of person at this stage in my life. But then as I'm saying it, my brain just is having this paradigm shift where I am running all of the trauma in my life through this and kind of seeing it in a new light. And I'm like, yeah, that thing did happen. But I did make a decision about what the narrative was on that life experience. Right. I did get molested. Is getting molested in and of itself this thing that needed to destroy everything around it? Or did I make a decision what the narrative was? There are people who lose all of their limbs and are more positive than somebody who lost their job. Right. That's because it's a story that they decided to tell. And I realized in that moment that free will, not that I was thinking about free will back then, but that free will is in the narrative. Anyway, so and so my mind is just spinning. I leave, I go to the dance club, and I was kind of a bully at this short phase of my life. I had become popular for the first time in my life after not ever being. And so I was kind of just treated people poorly. And so I was walking through this dance club and I was hugging people who I had bullied and telling people I'd found the secret to happiness, and just kind of felt like I stepped into an enlightenment in that moment. And then I died. So while I was gone, I woke up, I guess. I don't know. I was just in this big blue ball of vibrating light. And I wouldn't have known what vibration looked like. I didn't know what any of those words meant, vibrating frequency, until I had this experience. Right. At this point, I believe I'm a born again or a backslidden Christian. Like my views on God are that he's real and that I'm sinning and have fallen away from him. Now I'm in this and I realize I am God, that I'm in this. I am separate from it in that I'm still experiencing it as my own consciousness, but that this is home. This is the place I have been homesick for my entire life, and that this thing communicating with me is me, that me and a bunch of others me's make this up, this collective, and that this is God. Wow. And it's communicating not in words, but I could hear my brain translate it to words when I woke up. Yeah. And it said that you learned everything you went to learn. You did everything you went to do. You can come home now if you want. You can stay here, which was bliss, like bliss in a way that I can't even describe, like life outside of pain and attachment. And, or you can go back. If you want to go back, we have something super cool for you to do. And I decided to go back, even though going back felt like a sacrifice. It didn't feel like I was not attached to this life at all in that place. And when I went back, it felt like I had to live my entire life to get to the present moment, which I assume is what people describe as your whole life flashing before your eyes. But when I pictured that, I always pictured like a film strip or something very linear, where this was, I was in every single moment previous to that moment. Wow. And so I was a baby, and then I was a toddler, then I was a kid. And so my life was flashing before my eyes, but through my eyes. I was sucking my thumb when I woke up. Wow. And because I was a baby a millisecond ago. Right. And I woke up and I just knew a lot. I knew a lot. I knew that we have been everything that has ever existed on this planet, that this planet is a stage, a place that we come play games, that we were the dinosaurs, we were the Egyptian gods, we were everything that's ever been here. And that that whatever game we were currently playing was about to change to a different game. And that before that could happen, everyone else we would all wake up and realize that we were playing a game. And nothing, the parameters of the game we were playing were, that might be all I knew at that moment. I did suddenly know how to do things and have talents and gifts that I didn't have before.
Like what?
Not like playing the violin or anything, but just my personality drastically changed. And I was just capable, I guess, in a way that I was never capable before.
Interesting.
And I don't know if that's because I just shed a bunch of mental blocks, which I think is really the difference between capable people and not capable people. But I became a phenomenal communicator. I became someone who could paint an image that anyone could understand in their mind while talking to people. I could tell what people were thinking. I could tell what people were actually saying. When people talk, it doesn't matter what they say to me. They are communicating it feels like subtext, which is a common gift now in the last few years. But
you know the truth.
I know the truth. And I came back knowing that. I came back and could hear the thoughts of the people standing next to the bed.
Wow.
I could hear the doctor's judgment and fear about someone on drugs near her. Like I could hear all of that. I could hear all of her baggage around who I was as a person and how it had nothing to do with me. I could see people's projections. So when they were projecting things, I could see that for what it was. And that was all instant when I woke up. I then spent 5 years, I guess 4 years after that, communicating with what I called the aliens.
Okay.
Which was just kind of an affectionate nickname. But I'm sure it's what other people describe as guides.
Okay.
And the communication with them was telepathic. It was in my dreams. My dreams were mostly spent in what I call alien school now, as kind of a joke, but where I was taught things that applied to my life back then, that applied to my life now, and things that I haven't gotten to use yet, like moving things with my eyes and teleporting and levitation. I feel in my gut how to do those things. Like I feel where the muscles are, but it's just not time to use them yet.
So interesting. And so in alien school, do you see figures?
So what they look like is, I guess, stereotypical alien imagery, but there's nothing solid or dense about them. So
like gray with the big eyes kind of thing?
Yeah, so they're shaped like that, although I never saw feet. Felt like their legs tapered off and they hovered. But they aren't solid. They're like, if you look at a light for a couple minutes and then look up at a white ceiling, you have that red and blue
like how
light.
Your retina's burned out of what you've been looking at. So it shows the opposite, basically.
Yeah. So you or like when they're on a steamy day, the road, the heat coming off of the road, the way that vibrates, they look like that, but just slightly more dense than that. So plasma, maybe. There aren't a ton of things that I can compare it to, but they're made out of light. They're made out of energy. They're not made out of like dense physical matter. And by learning to look at them, they're very easy for me to see. Like ghosts are very easy for me to see. Chakras are very easy for me to see because I've just worked that muscle a lot. So it's kind of, I guess with those pictures, those pictures in the 90s where you look at them and then the hidden thing comes forward, those never worked for me, but I'm assuming that that's what it's like. Once I learned how to see energy, then it became very easy to see all of these things that just kind of exist on a higher frequency.
And did all of these skills, all of them stay at their full strength that you had after the experience?
it grew and grew and grew the entire time. Like, because then the entire rest of my time on drugs was spent in this kind of education with these beings. It became my whole, I was around people doing crime and everything else, and I kind of had one foot in that world, but those people were all strangely motivated to take care of me while I figured all of this other stuff out. And I would...
Caring criminals.
Yeah, it was very much a community, but it was also kind of scratching back. So I played kind of a life coach. I was intuitive in a way that often knew when the cops were going to come, or, you know, like these...
So handy.
Yeah.
Like a psychic criminal. It's
Yes.
really useful.
It sounds batshit, but I also could intuitively figure out how to do things with like health, and there was a phase where everyone was getting like MRSA, and
oh yeah, the bacteria, right?
like staph infection.
Yeah, MRSA stuff.
And I could figure out how to make the infection go away.
Wow.
I just had a soothing effect on people. Sometimes I think some people were just afraid of me, and so and I'm just always entertaining. At the very least, I was entertaining to be around, and so we took care of each other. But there was a point where I was selling drugs, and I would trade drugs for books on like esoteric magic, new age things, all the different religions, natural health stuff. And I could read in a way that was like, I could get through a book in a couple of hours, cause I could just scan pages and like absorb the, there was a phase where, they would give me messages, and I had to give messages to strangers. And that was kind of a learning, a muscle, you know, like building a muscle that I didn't know was there. And these messages were awful to deliver.
Like
just
what?
Like, you will have to forgive your dad for the way that he abused you before this relationship's going to work. And, you know, I'm just like a stranger giving you a note at a dance club or a grocery store about your dad molesting you. And they were always right.
Wow.
I only had one person in all of that time who got very mad at me. And he got very mad at me because obviously the note was correct. And although he was like, this isn't correct. I was like, well, if this wasn't correct, you would just roll your eyes and throw it in the trash.
That's
you wouldn't be
You'd think I was
screaming
crazy.
at me right now.
Yeah.
And even that had a purpose. Like I had to have that experience to read him and get better at trusting that like small voice. And so I healed. I got better and stronger. I learned where a lot of controls are. I learned to trust the wiring under the board more than things I could see, touch, and taste. And then I got clean, and I went back to sleep for just forgot it all. Just went and lived back in the dream for years, a couple years. I think that was necessary to help me with balance.
So no drugs for 2 years.
No drugs and no alien shit. No magic. No, none of that. Was just a normal person. Rebuilt my life. Got married. Started having kids. And then on like 11/11 of 2007, right after I got married, I also married someone initiated.
A Mormon, right? Is he a
No,
Mormon? Oh, he's
no,
not.
that's my best friend. My podcast partner. This was my husband and I separated a year ago. But he was also like, you know, a different tribe probably, but also someone who was awake.
Okay.
And we got married, and our wedding was very strangely powerful, and nobody could quite put their finger on it, but there was just kind of an energy that descended that night that everyone just felt, you know, not how you feel at a wedding. It was just, everyone's like, I can't put my finger on it. I felt like I was at something magic. I felt euphoric and, you know, and then about 2 months after that, or a month and a half after that, I was telling someone that I used to celebrate 11/11 as like a holiday because it was a portal or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like I opened a door in my mind and all of this stuff came back. And then the next few years were really about kind of reintegrating and now like actually walking between the worlds, like actually functioning in society, which I didn't have to do. So it was easy to be up in the ether the whole time while on drugs. And then also applying these things to my life, learning how to create realities, how to weave the narrative, how to attract things to myself, how to heal myself.
And the 1111, was that, because that's a significant number, a very mystical number to a lot of people. Did you deliberately get married on that date, or was that a fluke?
No, we didn't get married on that day. We did get married, like I had astrologically kind of lined things. I wanted to get married in an air sign since we were both air signs.
No.
Where
have I just got that you got married on 11/11?
It was right. It was the year of our wedding. So we got married in October, and then like 6 weeks later on 11/11.
Oh, like 2011 November. Is that what you mean, or the 11th of the month?
The 11th of November, 2007.
11/11. Now I'm in. So my question stands.
So it was just a day.
Okay.
We didn't get married that day. It was just a day that the same year.
We're in an evil loop now.
Yeah.
Where I keep asking you. This is where the simulator guy is like, check this out. There's these two broads here. What's this?
I probably put that together confusing. So we got married in 2007 in October. A month later, I was at work and realized that the date was the 11th of November.
Okay.
And I told the coworker, I used to celebrate 11/11 like a holiday, and then all of a sudden everything came flooding back.
Huh.
And
but when you used to celebrate it, then the 11/11.
That's when I was on drugs. So like when the entire time I was on drugs, I was just, after I like woke up or whatever, I was just in that space, just in that kind of ether, supernatural, because I didn't have to get up and go to work. I didn't have to pay my mortgage. I didn't have to do any of these feet on the ground type things. And I think when I got clean, I had to learn how to do those feet on the ground type things. And I would tell you that I was magic and that I talked to aliens and that I knew all these things and that I can hear when people lie, but I couldn't access those files. I knew those things were true about me at one point, but I couldn't access that part of myself. And I believed that had to be partitioned off for a couple years because I needed to learn how to live life.
Right.
I needed to learn
without
how to
drugs.
Yeah, and just how to have like a 3D life where it's even now, and I have the privilege of having a career that doesn't require me getting up and going to a day job or anything, but there are times where I am so far in the sky, so far in outer space that I'm not great on the ground. I have a very centered, feet on the ground work partner, and I describe him as the guy walking on the ground and me as the balloon that he's holding that's floating in the sky, and we have this great like symbiotic relationship that helps with everything. We also have a podcast that talks about a lot of this stuff, so I've managed to make it into a career. Right.
And sorry to sound like some obsessive person over this 11/11 thing. There is a reason I'm asking, but you said that at one point you celebrated that date, 11/11.
So I believe that 11/11 is an activation code.
Okay, that's what I was after. Yeah. Was what was the significance of 11/11?
Now I believe it's an activation code. Now I believe that my beliefs on it have kind of changed because we didn't have so much of trying to articulate what we really are relies on metaphors that we have in front of us. And we didn't have virtual reality video games 20 years ago for me to now say like, oh, that's what this is.
Right.
Now, I believe, do you know anything about video games?
I, as a matter of fact, do, yes.
Okay. My understanding, and this was back then, how it was explained to me, is that who we actually are is the equivalent of an RPG game.
Okay.
So we are actually not here. We are up somewhere, and we have a bird's eye view of everything. and we can set intentions, decide what we want to experience, and then put it into motion.
And for listeners who are not gamers, that's a role-playing game.
Role-playing game, yeah. The other kind of game that you can play is a first-person shooter, where you are in the game and the view that you have of the game is through the eyes of the character. And it's way more exciting, way more emotional, but very limited strategy opportunities, because you're only going to see things. You're not seeing things before they're happening.
Right.
You don't have the big picture. And so that is life experienced through the ego. That is life experienced on Earth.
Right.
We are both of those people. Most people believe themselves to be the first person shooter. They believe the ego that you are experiencing things through is actually you. The way that the aliens described it was that every time you come here, you get a body, and that body has its own artificial intelligence. And that artificial intelligence through which you explore the world is what we would call the ego. So you need it, you have to have it, but it doesn't have, it's a creation, not a creator. And so its motives are different than your real motives. It is programmable, so it is programmed by society. So when you are a kid and you are raised religious, and you have a religion telling you that you are not worthy of God's love, even if you leave that religion later, now you have an ego that is programmed that you are unworthy. And that ego, if left to its own devices, will just play out realities that feed back that program.
It'll filter everything that's happening to you.
Yeah, so it will seek out relationships that mirror back that idea that you're not worthy.
Right.
It will seek validation. It will... it's incapable of confidence. It's all arrogance. It's all just, and most people think their entire life is, and who they are is that program of the ego. So waking up, as I call it, is realizing that you, like the true you, the you that will be here after this body's gone, is up there playing an RPG game.
Wow.
Integrating the two of those, and then becoming someone that is able to toggle back and forth between the two. Because it's fun. It's fun to experience life through. I wouldn't want to have sex while I'm up there. I want to be down here and enjoying that experience. But it's an entire process of fixing the bad programming in the ego, learning what the ego's voice sounds like. That took years of Post-it notes written on the walls.
Wow.
Now I feel like my ego has like a male voice. It's so vastly different than my own voice that I spent years trying to kill the ego or destroy the ego or whatever. And I finally realized it's a annoying roommate that you have to have, and just treat it like an annoying roommate. It's not the boss. It doesn't run shit, but like I accept it and love it. And do constantly work on the programming in it, because you can change programming and write over the disk and be able to accomplish more things in your life.
So hold that thought 1 second. I have to take this pop filter off your mic because it's driving me nuts, because I'm looking through you through this pop filter.
Oh, this thing. Okay.
Isn't it aggravating? Thank you.
I like that. That's going to help my eyes.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So that's beyond fascinating. I mean, everything you've just said. So, I mean, for starters, how would one override the programming of the ego? How do you do that?
This is a work in progress, and kind of what my podcast turned into was this kind of dissecting of who we are as people and things that make us tick, and some examples that I'm currently spending a lot of time thinking about. Do you know anything about like attachment theory?
I mean, I've heard the phrase, but I don't really know what that means.
So you have the three types of attachment. You have secure attachment, which is just someone who believes that they are lovable and that they will love people and that they are worthy of love and that intimacy is a cool part of life. They're not afraid of it. They don't run from it. They don't overly seek it out. When they get into a relationship, they just expect things to be good. When it's time to work out kinks, it doesn't feel like the walls are closing in. They don't feel pressure, but they also don't feel a fear of loss. And allegedly, 50% of people have this type of attachment style.
That's the healthy one, though,
That's
right?
the healthy one.
Sounds really
I just
good.
haven't met enough people with secure attachment to believe that. But the other types you have are anxious, preoccupied. This is the kind of person that when they get into a relationship, the relationship becomes their entire life. It's all they can think about. They are preoccupied with it 24/7. They don't want to hang out with anyone but this person. They feel jealous. They feel obsessed. They feel slighted all of the time. They are chasing. Someone with like a severe preoccupied, anxious attachment style is someone who, when they are single, is constantly looking for a relationship, constantly thinking about love. And they tend to seek out dismissive, avoidant, or fearful avoidant, because the avoidants are split into two. So an avoidant person, a dismissive avoidant, believes that they are fine by themselves. They have like an overinflated sense of independence. Love and relationships to them feel like they are going to lose their freedom and their independence. They feel the walls closing in on them. Every time they experience closeness and intimacy, they run. They break they in their minds, they are running before they even leave. In their minds, they tear the person down. They pick the person apart and break them down in their minds until they are fine with leaving them. A fearful avoidant is someone who wants intimacy, but then just can't stop this mechanism from pushing the other person away. So what happens when you get like a fearful avoidant? A dismissive avoidant can go to such an extreme that it's a narcissist. That push-pull in relationships that comes from an avoidant can trigger a secure person into a anxious person, because all of these styles are a little fluid, and depending on your childhood, it all comes from how your needs were met as a kid. So just like an anxious person being too clingy will cause a secure person to become kind of avoidant, because it doesn't feel good to have someone jealous or to feel like they're requiring too much. These are all really good examples that I'm currently thinking a lot about when it comes to programming, because this is something that comes from how your parents met your needs as a kid. They can also be triggered by past bad relationships. Some of these can just be triggered by getting into a relationship with someone who has one of these anxious styles. But this is a program where love can exist and be great underneath between two people, but this programming can come in and just destroy this relationship. Right. And so I've known tons of women who were just happy and secure, and then they get into a relationship and they turn into a completely different person. I know tons of guys that are like, not to generalize it as men and women, but most of the examples that I have are guys who are cool as hell, and then they get into a relationship with someone that they're clearly into, or even chased maybe at the beginning, and then you watch them just make up these like arbitrary reasons for leaving, and it's like nobody knows why they're doing any of the things that they're doing, because it's a program. It's programming. Somewhere inside of them, some of them learned that their needs would not be met. And I learned about attachment theory when raising my younger children, because I'm someone who doesn't attach very easy. It doesn't come naturally to me. And it was something I was afraid of happening, because my daughter I had when I was older, I didn't attach to her correctly, and she got hurt as a result. And so I researched it to try to like emulate.
Right.
And I read it from that perspective. And that perspective is when a child doesn't have the means to when they can't meet their own needs, and you as their attachment figure, they are attached to you to survive. It is literally life or death for them.
Right.
So when you see a 9-month-old playing on the floor with some toys and everything's good and fine, and if you watch a baby or a toddler, they will turn around and check and make sure that their attachment figure is there. And when their attachment figure is still sitting there over there on the chair, the way they do it is very casual. It's a check-in. Nobody even really notices it's happening.
Right.
And everything is fine. These toys are great. If that attachment figure gets up and walks out of the room, suddenly these toys in this unfamiliar space all become monsters. Monsters that are going to attack the child because the child knows that they are not. And there's this fear and this panic and this need to immediately reconnect to their attachment figure. If their attachment figure is someone who just meets their needs, picks up the baby every time they're crying, and meets those needs, then they grow up to become securely attached adults because their expectation is that when I have needs, they will be met.
Someone's going to help me.
Exactly. We were raised in a generation that was afraid of spoiling children. So what happened was cry it out was a thing, and people believed that you should leave your baby to cry in a crib. And what that does is tell a child who can't soothe themselves, because we are like, no, they'll learn to soothe themselves. And that's not what happens. It's that they learn to give up. And so they either grow up to be anxiously attached, that when they connect with someone, they mistrust that love so much that they try to bottle it and hold it tight, and they end up just pushing it away. Or they became someone who gave up and just decided no one will ever meet my needs, and if I'll just avoid it and not need anyone ever. And it's all this very subconscious programming, and you're not thinking about that. When you're experiencing it, you're thinking, how come he hasn't answered my text? I need him to answer my text. I think I have the right. But that's all just this 9-month-old screaming on the floor because so these are my current, I'm always on some kind of
mission.
Yeah.
And so how old was your daughter when you realized, I'm not feeling as motherly as I should be feeling?
Immediately.
Straight away. Okay.
I think I left her alone for a weekend with friends when she was 5 weeks old.
Okay.
Which is banana. Like to think about my, I wouldn't go to the grocery store without one of my younger 5-week-olds.
So how many kids do you have?
3, 4. I have a stepson also, but I have 3 that I gave birth to.
Okay. And so you're saying that there's actually was a difference between the kids in how you felt as far as being a mum. Like 2 of them you felt like connected and 1 you didn't. Is that what you're saying?
I think that attachment for me, I think I loved all of them.
Yes.
Attachment for me was something that didn't come naturally with the oldest. I was 17. I was in a terrible marriage.
And it was
I was broken. I did not love myself. I don't think you can truly love someone else when you don't love yourself. And now that I know what I know about attachment, I think I was avoidant with her. I think the need that her needing me was scary for me. And I took care of her. But I spent so much time looking at what other people seem to feel for their kids that I was constantly lining myself up against that and being like, I must be broken. I must not love her. I must not. But I was also just a 17-year-old that still wanted to do 17-year-old things, you know? But then I would use that as a case against myself for why it was so awful for her that I'm her mom, and that how lucky she would be if my sister was her mom. And when I started using drugs, it was kind of this perfect excuse to give her a better life than I could give her.
Right.
And I
justified the drug use as though you were doing her a favor.
Absolutely. I was like, well, I won't take her into this lifestyle. But there was no point where I was going to pick being a mom over drugs.
And so when did you start studying the attachment stuff? Was it pretty close to her being
I didn't want to have kids. I got clean, and I didn't want to have kids until I got her back. Because one of the most important things to me was because I did care about her. I did love her. I didn't bond with her. I didn't attach to her correctly. And as soon as I got clean and was healed and was better, I suddenly felt that hole in myself where she belongs. I suddenly felt that loss. Once I had healed and loved myself, I felt a huge part of my life missing without her. But now the ball was in her court. And I respected the fact, like I could have gone and legally fought to get her back. And I felt like this has to be her choice. And if I have to live the rest of my life with this hole in my heart, then so be it. I deserve that. And it took probably 4 years. She was 14 when I got her back. We are very close. And she is incredibly similar to me in personality for someone who wasn't around me for 10 years of her childhood. And then, but that was a fear of mine going into, I didn't have more kids. I didn't try to have more kids till I got her back. That was, to me, I never wanted her to feel like it was her because it wasn't. And I felt like me going and having more kids would tell her like, just not you, you know? I was afraid. I was terrified that I would not bond correctly again. Usually pretty aloof in all of my relationships. And I was afraid that I would fail another child. And so I read about attachment parenting, and that changed my perspective on everything. So a lot of attachment parenting with the younger kids was a going through the motions kind of thing for me. I don't feel, I think some people feel like an anxious need to, like an anxious attachment to their kids. And I didn't have that. I think I had a very secure attachment with the future kids, but I understood, and it completely resonated to me that leaving a helpless infant in a crib to cry was going to give them the wrong idea about what life was and what to expect from life. And so I just met all their needs. And for a year of both of their lives, I just cleared the calendar, and I was just available to hold them. And they both fully took advantage of that. Like they were both high need kids who would have ended up very messed up if I wasn't, because some kids just don't give a shit, you know, but these kids were kids who needed to feel connected all the time, needed me close, slept in my arms, at night and during naps. And, it really helped moving forward. I had fully bonded with them. I had fully connected with them. And they are very secure children, very comfortable in their own skin, very comfortable when they are away from me now. And I believe that is as a result of that. Adult attachment is something that I started getting into very recently when noticing patterns in relationships for me. And now, after reading a few books on it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is the same attachment that I was so I had taken the steps to prevent anxious attachment or avoidant attachment for my kids' future. And now I am kind of going through and clearing out this programming and this tendency to be one or the other in my own life.
So you've got so much knowledge on this. It's like you've really absorbed these books. Yeah. And well, getting back to programming. So your theory of us that we're out there somewhere and sort of overseeing ourselves in this game. I mean, where do you envision that we are? What does it look like? Do we still look like ourselves, or are we just blobs of energy somewhere?
I think we're the blobs of energy somewhere. I think that where we are is coming into focus right now. What I was told back then by the aliens was that we play games every so often, the parameters change, and that what now I guess we would say the constructs change. And so this is 2000, and they said that we were coming out of a masculine age that was fear-based, and the parameters were dichotomy. So you had yin yang, good, bad, male, or light, darkness, male, female, just this yin yang. And that we were learning all of these things and it was 3-dimensional, and that what we were going into was 8-dimensional when it was all said and done.
8-dimensional. I've never heard more than 5.
5 is like where we're toggling in and out of right now. Good grief.
I mean, where's the other 3 dimensions?
We're going to levitate. I'm pretty sure we're going to levitate. 8-dimensional feminine age, no dichotomy. So all of these dichotomies would fade.
Well, what's the 6th and 7th dimension?
I don't know. I don't think we get to know what one is until, I believe the 4th was the ether. What I call the ether, what other people call the astral plane. And that's where we actually are. And when I talk to people about, can you hear people lying? Can you hear, there's a thing that people do when they lie that almost feels like a partition goes up. They put like a wall up. Some people it's as thin as a curtain. Other people have brick walls. When you're talking to someone and you can hear what their actual motives are and everything, that's where we really are. That's the ether. That's what I call the ether.
And you said though that you lost some of your skills when you got clean. Mm-hmm. So where are you skilled now?
More powerful than ever before. A lot of that being in the last year.
Is that chair horrible for you? Do you want my... Because I have the comfy chair.
No, I'm great.
Because I consider myself the boss of the podcast. I get the one with like the extra half-inch of foam.
I'm great. I'm just trying not to make a lot of noise when I shift.
But I'll trade... If you get uncomfy, I'll trade chairs with you. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
So skills, you say more powerful than ever.
Yeah, I slowly woke up again. I think had to learn all of the things that I learned very quickly during that kind of spiritual experience on drugs. I had to learn again and actually apply to life, manifesting reality, law of attraction kind of stuff, ego work. And it was a very long and slow process. During all of that, I woke people up. Not like I have some ability to wake people up, but like I made an agreement before I got here to hand some keys to some people that they gave me before we got here. So for me, I experience it like people just have a few dots, and if I just connect those few dots, all of a sudden this snowball effect happens for them, and they snap awake. And that the thing that I was told I could come back and do was that I would be someone who would connect people's dots for them. And I believe that is something that we all agreed together. So all of the people that I've ever woken up, that's because that was a thing that we agreed ahead of time. And so I have, as a result, kind of mixed feelings about people who charge exorbitant amounts of money to provide the same service. I
see. To be sort of spiritual guides or advisors or life coaches. Or
there are some things where like Karen Rontowski like should absolutely charge for her readings. Okay. That's just like a gift. Someone's using that gift. There are other people who are like YouTube stars that have similar gifts that I do. And I have a hard time I would love to have a conversation with them because they get brought to my attention all the time because we are similar. And so like I have a podcast where I talk about a lot of this stuff, which as a result has connected a lot of dots for people who I believe were supposed to listen to the podcast so that I could connect these dots, so that they could wake up, so that more of us can go into these higher dimensional realities. And then I find out that there are people who are charging $1,500 to people so that they can get a painting that changes the vibration in their room. And I just would like to have a conversation with maybe them, and maybe you explain to me how. That's okay. But that's just my own judgment, and I'm open to hearing how that fits into it.
I always see both sides of the coin on these things. I think it's in my name, Gray, that I see the white and I see the black, and I usually literally can twist my mind to both sides of the scenario because I've painted and earned my living as a painter, and I went through a phase of painting I just because I'm not trained, I'm self-taught, I just called them stripy paintings, but they're insanely stripy. I would hand paint like thousands of lines. And people started to buy the paintings, which funnily enough, my earlier ones were like $1,500. And they would come back to me and say that things had happened. Like they were putting on the belief. Well, they said, one lady, for example, she'd had her house for sale for like years, and she put a painting up on her front door and she got an offer immediately. And the painting's on the inside of the house. So it's not like somebody saw it and went, oh, I'm buying the house because of this. And then another lady was very ill and she said, I've bought your artwork and I'm feeling better. She said they're like making me feel well. Now color's healing. So I was just like, well, you're picking the colors you like. Those are probably healing. So, I mean, I was getting money.
I do believe in it. Even.
Yeah, I mean, I believe there was something
in
to it.
Getting paid for your art. And I guess to me, it's like I have comedy. So if you, I don't charge to help, but you can buy tickets to our comedy show.
Yes, that's right. It's probably like I wasn't, when I was selling my paintings, though, I was just selling my paintings. I wasn't saying, hey, these are healing paintings. You know?
And it's not even that they're not healing paintings. It just feels... What about the person who can't afford your help? What about that person? What if that person needed you and they are denied because they can't afford to go to your retreat?
Yes.
In those things, this is like where I would have a very open-minded conversation with this person and be ready for this person to be like, well, if they were supposed to, the money would have come to them, because I do kind of believe in that. So I guess...
So you're also playing devil's advocate.
I'm always playing devil's advocate.
You're doing me.
Yeah, I don't take very strong...
You're doing the exact same as me.
...stance because I believe everything exists. I believe every perception exists. So this is just an area where I'm aware that I have some judgment about, but I'm sure it's a gray area, and I wouldn't be surprised to find out that I just have a blind spot here because I feel like I specifically am never supposed to.
No, I've met other people, especially in the UK. I attended this college for a year, the College of Psychic Studies, and I met lots of healers. They were an accredited healing school in Britain.
Oh, wow.
And so I met all these healers, which frankly are completely the kind of people I would have made fun of prior to my own experience. You know, all of this healer, I'm a healer, right? How do you heal?
Yeah.
Oh, I just look at you. Right. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
You know? So, but a lot of them had the same as what you're saying. They said, well, I feel I've got a gift and it doesn't feel right to charge for it. Mm-hmm. So I definitely don't think you're alone there. You know, it's just interesting. And there's certainly people who do make a small fortune when they've had awakenings.
Because I don't think there's a value judgment on that, especially if you get there by drugs. I don't think you have to be a good person to see behind the veil. And there are other things too. I don't like it. I believe that we are coming out of the age of the guru. And my issue with religion is that we're God. And so what religion says is, hey, I will be your broker between you and God. And you come to me and I will grant you access to God, which is nefarious when you think you're just getting in between somebody and themselves and convincing them that they need you. Even more nefarious when then they tell you all of these natural urges that you have are bad. So the urge to masturbate is the devil. And so now you have triggered this shame cycle and this is something that we've talked about on our podcast because he was indoctrinated as a kid. Mormon. He's a Mormon. I was a meth head. And so I talk about my experiences with addiction. Right. And he's like, I had that, but with like masturbating. And that is insane. So this religion convinced you that you had an addiction and then triggers this shame cycle and causes you to keep like... more and more broken, running to them to get salvation from what is yourself. And I feel like the gurus do the same thing. And when people ask me, I'm very like, it's you. And if I am convincing you it's me, then I'm not doing it right. My only job is to hold up a mirror in front of you until you realize that you are the God of your existence and that I may say things that resonate. I may speak a language that you've wished that somebody would speak your whole life. you're going to be that for somebody else one day. You probably are that for other people and just don't know it. But I don't want to be your broker to you. I don't want you to feel like you need to get a session with me in order to forever. You know, I don't want you to mortgage your house to come to one of my fucking retreats.
Do you have retreats?
No.
No. Okay.
But this is my, I don't know how I got on that thing. So I would wake people up for free, just we would become friends, and it would kind of help them connect their dots for a little while.
So waking somebody up, and I'm going to ask you again, are you cold because the fan's over you?
Nope,
you
not
chilly?
at all.
Okay, all right. Am I like, is this attachment?
very
Am
nice.
I like overly attached to you? Right. Here, take my sweater. I saw you pulling on your sleeve. So this is probably a habit that you have. Yeah. Okay. And I lose my thought really super easily.
What time are we at?
Time. Here, let me look at my phone. How much time do you have?
I have a meeting with my manager on the phone at 7.
What time do you have to leave?
Or sorry, meeting with her at 5:30, but I can push that back.
5:30. How much time did you allow for this?
Not enough.
Groundbreaking podcast.
I'm moving it to just real quick.
I love that I have an awakened person who has a meeting with her manager.
Isn't it?
But this is as good as... Oh, go ahead.
Let's do 6:45, actually. Sorry.
I'm leaving this whole thing in.
Yeah.
Because this is so LA.
How fancy do I say right now?
I love it's part of the program.
Yep.
In the program, you have a meeting with your manager. You just reminded me of Karen Rontowski as well, which I think my new favorite thing, because I love her, I think my new favorite thing she casually said was, well, I was talking to my demonologist.
Yeah. So we had her on ours the other day, and Aaron has already... feels like he has stretched his capacity for open-mindedness as far as possible with me. And then Karen, 5 minutes in, is like, well, then my dog said, my friend who talks to my dog sent me a text.
She's so lovely.
She is. I love her.
So I remembered what I was going to say. You were talking about how you awaken people. So do you find it's the same pattern or structure repeated with people that you awaken them, or do you have to tailor a sort of a strategy for different people?
Now it is so different because it is through the podcast that it is far less personal. But it used to just be they would become a new friendship and I would have a crush on them. It would feel like a crush. And I realized after a while that this is just something to keep me invested. Not like an overly romantic but just it felt good to talk to them.
Yeah.
It felt like I felt very engaged and invested.
Right.
And it was, there were archetypes, I guess, of the different methods through which people would be waking up to who they actually were. But I don't think any two were the same, and it was usually via a projection of some sort. So it would be a person going through a rough relationship, and as I was helping them through that, they would start to wake up to who they were. Other people, it was dreams or psychic phenomena that they were experiencing that made them realize. And I don't know how to describe how I would know. There would just come a point where it would click and I would know exactly what was about to go down. A lot of this isn't real. This isn't real. Here's what is real. Here's where the controls to where you actually are exist. Talking a lot about my own life experiences, things that I have experienced. A lot of times when the person comes into my life, it's while I am hacking that program myself or have recently done it. There is a sensation that I have experienced everything that this person has gone through. So you ever had like a broken heart or gotten cheated on or something, and then someone comes to you with that, and you already know, all the markers of that. You know all the process that they are about to go through. So it just feels like that. Like when I'm helping people, it feels like it's something I've already done, even though there's sometimes that isn't.
It's interesting that you say that, because at the end of my experience, which I know we'll talk about another time, but I was sobbing at the very end of mine because I felt the grief of like 1,000 lifetimes, 1,000 losses. And I was like sobbing so deeply, and it very much changed me. But I know that what you mean when I meet people now and talk to people, it seems with everyone, there's something relatable. Yeah. There's a connection. There's, no matter who it is I'm looking at, I feel that there's a connection of compassion and empathy, you know. So it's interesting you say that. Now, the $1 million question then, which I know everyone listening to this is going to be like, well, ask her. So how do we access the controls to change the program, you know?
The number one rule is fully accept that you are 100% in control of everything that has ever happened to you and will ever happen to you. And that has to resonate. I can't tell you that if that doesn't resonate. If that doesn't resonate, you're probably not listening to this podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, there's a part of you that knows and is looking for or has already found that veil. So what that means from like a macrocosmic view is that this is just a game, that good and bad doesn't exist. Even things you want to cling to, the people that hurt you, people that abused you, the guy that molested you, all of it. That from a macrocosmic place, that's an experience that you came here to experience. And that feels crazy to say that. You want to hold on to know this was wrong, this was bad. But so long as you believe, and I'm usually very conservative with sharing this because although I do believe it's a huge key to life, it does open me up to people telling me that I'm taking away from people's experience. So we're going to talk macrocosmic versus microcosmic. So macrocosmic, from before time existed, outside of the realm of right and wrong, good or bad. And this is just, let's say you're playing a video game and you get shot in the face. That's awful. It's awful to get shot in the face. But the person with the controller in their hand doesn't give a shit because it's a game. So from macrocosmic, outside of that, it doesn't matter. And none of it happened against your will. From a microcosmic standpoint, those things did happen. Your ego did experience them. You did pick up programming. They did hurt you. And now you have to do all of the work to heal those. But at the very, very core, at the end of the day, at the very bottom and foundation of all of it, you have to truly, honestly believe that nothing has ever happened to you against your will. And the reason for that is because somewhere you do have that entire RPG control panel in front of you. And in order for that to come into focus, you have to honestly believe that you have that RPG control panel in front of you. And in order for you to honestly believe that, you have to reconcile the fact that ultimately you have been in control this entire time. And then once you have truly absorbed that, which takes a while, you have to run every single experience in your life through that, it comes a little more into focus. And then you have to realize that most things that happen on a more, once you're an adult, you want them to happen. And that life is not happening to you and never has been happening to you. You wanted everything to happen. I describe the universe as the person who fills your orders. And that the universe does not, because people are like, the universe just hates me today. And it's like, no, the universe has no judgment about you whatsoever. The universe is Amazon. That's it. The universe doesn't send you things it thinks you need. The universe sends you things you ordered. And there is a higher part of you who's like, I'm never going to wake up until I experience this heartache. This person has to leave me. My husband has to leave me. And that higher self is able to talk to the higher self of the husband and say, like, I have to have this life experience for this thing to click, for the thing that I really want to happen. There's some of that as you integrate with your higher self, it won't be so mysterious. But in this beginning, when you're trying to figure out where the controls are, if it feels like things are happening to you, know that those things are probably your higher self, or you have to ask yourself. So now it's very easy. I know exactly what everything is. But as I was finding these controls, I would have to ask myself, this thing that I think I hate, is it the end of something old falling away? Because I would be like, I want to own a house. Well, in order for me to own a house, this other thing had to fall apart first. Because when you change paradigms that you want, the old one falls apart, and it's very easy to get lost in that falling apart and forget that you ordered a new thing and lose your shit and try to hold on to the thing that's falling apart, and then everything turns into a real mess. So I asked myself, did I ask myself for something new that would cause an ending here? And a lot of times, yes. The other thing is, am I ordering garbage? And I describe the universe as a waiter, just a server at your table, and they bring you what you're paying attention to. And so if you're someone that loves to bitch about your boss, what an asshole your boss is, that's your favorite subject. If you're spending an hour a day talking about and feeling a lot of feelings about, the universe will walk up to your table and doesn't have judgment, isn't paying attention to what you want. There's a verse in a book called ET 101 that says, the audio-visual, or the reality you are experiencing is an audio-visual demonstration of where your attention is. The universe assumes that your attention is on that which you desire and gladly provides you with more of the same.
Right.
That's it. There's no judgment there. One person doesn't earn better things than the other one. It just walked up to your table and you were like, my boss is a dick. My boss is a dick. My boss is a dick. And I was like, all right, well, we'll give you more of that. And the next thing you know, your boss continuously gives you more opportunities. This is something that I noticed a lot. I love that we're pointing out, and you could tell it's becoming a feminine age. And I love that we are pointing out men shit. But I have watched a lot of people get so far into that they are attracting a lot more of those experiences into their lives. And this is a slippery one to bring up. But
what do you mean, men? What
you mean, men
like
being assholes, like
okay.
men, there's definitely a power shift happening right now where men were this masculine driven society where women were made to feel like less than. That's shifting.
Right.
It's
yes.
It couldn't be more obvious.
Like in the 60s, it was fully men in the driver's seat, and now there's plenty of women in the driver's seat.
Yeah, right. And we are getting equality right and left. There are things shifting, the Me Too movement, all of this, and a more controversial example than I probably should have brought up, but it's something that I have seen where I participated in Me Too, and I love to I love it. I love this shift, and I love knowing that we're going into this feminine age.
Yeah.
But if a man treats me shitty, I'm not giving him a bunch of power, because I don't want another dude to treat me shitty the next day. Not that it's my responsibility how he acts, but I don't want to lean too hard into that experience and have that experience too much more.
Right. You don't want to dwell on it so much that you're in this energy ball of attracting more of that.
Yes.
Got it.
And that's just how it works.
Yeah, I feel
how
that
it works.
also. I feel that
so
also.
Have you ever noticed people who believe that life just happens to them, and they get on Facebook and they talk about, well, once again, nothing goes right for me, and blah, 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 blah. The satisfaction in the back of that, they are excited when life hands them lemons, because it just reinforces this belief that life is unfair for them.
Yeah.
But there is something, or like if you're in a toxic relationship and that person disappoints you, there is a satisfaction in them disappointing you. There is a, yes, now I get to be mad. I get to be mad. And we don't experience that. Right. Like on the outside, we're like, I'm a victim here. But if you really, really get honest with your true feeling, you are excited to get more of the same.
Yeah.
That's programming.
A lot of people almost predict their own life by doing that, by saying, yeah, well, I'm going to, they're going to treat me this way, or all women are this, or all men are this, which...
My expectation is that things are going to go well. And when things don't go well, we call it the Jessa Reed Guide to Always Winning. Everything is always happening for my benefit, period. And so you won't hear me spend much time at all feeling like a victim.
Right.
I might have an emotional response in the moment, but my overall life philosophy overrides a lot of that. And I ultimately believe even painful things are happening for my benefit. And I'm just only ever looking for that. And that's all I ever see. And as a result, my life is pretty sweet. I attract pretty awesome life experiences because that's really all I expect. And when things are bad, my attitude doesn't change much. And it's not blind positivity. It's not a mechanism of the conscious mind. I don't have a problem saying, this sucks. It's just not something I wallow in.
No, that's right.
And people in the New Age community, kind of, I ended up not resonating with a lot of them. I call them fake awakes. People that read a book, people that read The Secret and now feel like everything has to be the rage bubbling beneath a lot of people in the New Age movement is awful to be around, because it's like, just let it out. Just cuss and talk shit for a second. You know what I mean? Let all that stuff out, because you're not actually positive. You're not actually authentic.
Right.
You're miserable with a smile on your face because you think that that's spiritual. And I don't think that that's spiritual. You're having you're having a shitty day, say it, and then take all its power out. Those are the basic fundamental ways to find the controls. Trust yourself. Trust your small voice. When you start trying to tune in, your higher self, the universe, whatever, will give you a million opportunities to sharpen those tools and to use that control panel over and over again. And then new powers show up. And that sounds crazy, and I understand that, but I can now feel timelines and trajectories, and I couldn't do that 2 years ago. Where now I can feel the path that I'm currently on, and I feel like I have a Polaroid of how this one turns out. And I don't know how to change timelines. I've done it involuntary several times, but I've made a choice or chosen an attitude that then the future didn't feel. That photograph faded, like in Back to the Future, where he had that picture of his parents and it kept coming in and out of focus. It's kind of what it feels like. Those are all things I'm trying to learn how to let come into focus. And I just have to keep having more experiences, and then my brain will pick up on the pattern. It's like I'm leaning now towards where it's a frequency thing, that it's less about the choices that you make that change the timeline and more about the vibe.
Yes. That's how I feel for fully the vibe and the energy before it. You could say, as you say, with the inauthentic New Age people that we have all met, I'm sure one or two of these people, that they talk the talk, but underneath it is still the other person who's angst-ridden and putting out bad energy. I know a couple of people like this. Yeah. Do you have one of the things that sort of I've been incorporating for a while that seems to be good in my life is actually a sense of no expectations.
Yes.
Where I really feel, because my thing, which we'll do on your podcast, because my listeners have heard me talk about it a lot, my experience, it was everything to do with frequencies and vibrations. And I had never dealt with anything to do with science and this sort of thing. And then, like yourself, I suddenly came away knowing a bunch of stuff and scientific stuff, and my ability to learn was like rapid. I was like inhaling documentaries and books and this sort of thing. But I have this feeling that sort of everything's right in front of us. All of those possibilities are around us. And that sometimes when you actually, the expression, put your mind to it, you're in fact building a structure of your future that in fact could be walling you in from something better that could be happening. So the more, and I know someone who'd put loads of effort into pursuing something in entertainment to the point it was very obsessive. It was like a 9-to-5 job of really campaigning for their typical role in entertainment, acting and this sort of stuff. And I said, I can't tell you a logic behind it, but I intuitively feel that you are holding up your own career by doing this. Yeah. This energy, you've built such a wall of energy of trying to get this thing. Nothing can come back to you. Right. No occurrences can come back. No surprises and discoveries. No synchronicities. No good things can come back at you. You're in the where you play, what's that, racquetball. You're just shooting everything, and now you've made a solid wall. There's no other room for a player on the other side. Yeah. And as soon as the person, they were not necessarily agreeing with me, but they tried it. And I said, take your focus off your career and go and do something that's completely polar opposite. Do like gardening or DIY or something that's really using another energy. Help other people. Do something. And so much stuff in their career started to happen. And I just instinctively, intuitively, whatever you say, but I felt on some level I understood what was happening, that as soon as he stopped putting his attention to build this solid wall of energy of his expectation, it dissolved because his energy wasn't there to sustain it anymore. Yeah. And then all these other things were allowed in. There was no wall blocking it anymore.
That is, flow is so important. And the expectations is huge. Because when you tell someone to, like in manifesting reality, the difference between just a fantasy of something they want, I talk about like we keep things in different parts of our minds. And where most people keep their dreams is something called fantasy land, where they have never put it into a place where it's going to happen. They just keep it over here like, oh, well, when I get famous. And then there's no evidence in their life that they're making any moves towards that, or any evidence that they actually believe it could happen or should happen. But it's this kind of passive fantasy. And example I use of that is people who say like, I want a new apartment. I want a new apartment, or I want a new car. I want a new car, but they never do anything to get it. And they don't move it to that front burner. They don't move it to like, this is going to happen. I'm going to make this happen. But then their car breaks down, or they get evicted from their apartment. And suddenly this person who a month ago, when I was like, well, then why don't you just buy the car? They're like, well, I don't have the extra money. They're waiting for this like fantasy surplus of money rather than just reaching in and figuring out how to get that money. But then when the option is taken away from them and they're forced to put it on the front burner, then all of a sudden their mind is like, oh, I can just get this loan. Oh, I can just do this. And so the ability to take things out of fantasy land and put it here on the front burner and say, if I was going to be someone who makes television, what would I do? I would do this, this, and this. Right. Okay, well then let me take those steps forward. Right. And then all of that action that you're taking in the physical world will help that. However, that's a difference between like want it and am going to get it, am going to have it, or am creating it, and need it. There's something in that desperation that is a pushing energy. Yeah. And you're trying to attract something to yourself, but you are actually repelling it. And I just connected through all this attachment stuff that the way that people treat manifesting reality or going after goals sometimes is the way that an anxious, preoccupied person would go after a relationship, which is this thing that you're trying to create isn't going to come to you when you're calling it every single day and asking it why you're not answering my text, when you're going to come back here. That's a pushing energy. Yes. That's a repelling energy. Yeah. But rather just saying, I set this intention, so it's going to happen because that's the law. That's how things work. I have taken every bit of physical action I can take, and now I'm going to leave this thing to cook on the front burner, and I am going to enjoy and experience other things in life. The universe also doesn't like to be told how things are going to play out. So you can say, I want to make a TV show. That's the the basic parameters you get to set. The more you tell reality how things are going to look or how they're going to play out or when they're going to play out, the less likely you are to experience them that way. Yeah. There has to be a kind of like a childlike curiosity to actually experience these things.
Yes, a sense of wonder. A sense of wonder.
Yeah.
I feel that as well. Yeah. I'm a big believer as well, feeling that being active in what you love, I feel, is very important. There's a lot of people, and I've talked about this with other guests, with the secret thing, where everybody did expect something to happen, but they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so, of course, nothing's going to happen. Now, I'm very much... a lot of people would look at me and say, you're a go-getter. And I don't really think of myself at all as a go-getter. I just think I'm a person who, when I've decided there's something I want to try or experience, I go and work a way to try or experience it. Not in a chasing way, like I'm learning music now. And it's just a fun. I'm loving it. I'm writing poems that are becoming songs. I write professionally and I love writing. And opportunities come to me and are coming to me, but it's because I'm doing something. So I think it's important to do something in your life, no matter how tiny it is. Opportunities come from that juggling of the vibrations of energies with your activities, shakes things up like a pebble in the pond.
Mm-hmm. I think be the change you want to be, play the character that you want to play. If you say, I want a career in writing, then what would a writer do? What does a writer look like? What is the costume? Sync up to the character you want to play.
Yes.
And that is the secret was so frustrating for me because there were such huge, it was exciting that it became mainstream, and I think that was the point. But there were several huge blind spots in The Secret. And I do also think that was by design. I think that the people who were actually supposed to, I think that we needed to mainstream the idea that we are creating this reality, because it did plant that seed to where most people believe to some extent that we are creating our own reality, even though they don't do anything to get good at it. But people who were supposed to get that message, I think, did what I did, which was I recognized The Secret for the little bit of fluff that it was. And then I went and sought out all the people who were interviewed on The Secret. And I read all of their stuff. And things that I have learned that I've never read in anyone else's stuff. There's something about acknowledging the possibility of failure. And I don't know if that is about attachment to expectation. I haven't figured it out. But if I don't acknowledge that this might not work out the way that I want it to work out, it's more likely to fail, which is interesting. So there is definitely, if you're attached to the outcome, it's not going to turn out how you want.
Yes, I feel instinctively that being attached to the outcome is a recipe for disaster. And because I'm such a proponent of doing what you love, even like your work, you should find something to do that you love, because it's most of your waking hours, you know. I'm a big believer that, you've got to be doing what you love. And one of the reasons is, and I agree fully with you about acknowledging that failure might happen. You've got to love it so much that if it fails, you've enjoyed the journey.
Yes. Yeah. Do you think that's about vibration? Like, do you think that's, because I find I'm a huge proponent of gratitude, and not from a cheesy place of like generic whatever, but I believe that gratitude is the frequency where you will manifest the most that you want.
I believe that.
And I talk a lot about things that I'm grateful for. And to some people, it comes off as bragging, because I speak about what I'm grateful for about myself. I'm grateful that I am this. I am grateful that I'm this. I'm grateful that I get to live this life. I am grateful that I get to move move to California. I am grateful that I get to make this podcast. I'm grateful that I get to tour and do comedy. I'm grateful that I got to do this and this. And I'm in this attitude a lot. And I think this is the best manifesting attitude and also the funnest way to live your life. When I ask people what they're grateful for, a lot of time they can't tell you much. They give me generic answers like my kids or my family or whatever. But it's, I think that it is easier to live in an attitude of gratitude when you have a career that you love. But programming prevents a lot of people from doing that. When you tell people, examples of programming would be envy is an interesting piece of programming, because envy is the belief that because someone else has something, you can't also have it. And so that is that's very limiting. That there's a belief in a limited universe, that in this whole big universe of infinite possibilities, that other person's success is somehow guaranteeing that you can't also have that success. It's an interesting piece of programming that as a lot of people have inside of them.
It's interesting you mention envy, because I, from a very young age, like a teenager, I felt very strongly that when you would feel envious of somebody, it was because deep down you had the capability to do it yourself.
Wow, yeah.
And I felt that it was different from jealousy.
Yes.
Jealousy you could feel, and it could be something like, this is just a random example. Let's say you'd be jealous of a princess. Well, you can't, very likely, unless you're Meghan Markle, which clearly breaks this example completely. But, something that you are unlikely to have, like, oh, I'm envious of somebody living on the moon right now, or whatever, living in a space station. So you can do that. But envy for me, I would feel about entertainment people, and not in a bad way. And I think envy is a good thing. It's not meaning harm to the other person. Jealousy has a nasty connotation where it's like, you've got your snarls, energetic snarls on someone. But envy, for me, I feel very respectful about it. I would feel like, this person, let's say in entertainment, they got a show or they got this writing job. I used to be envious of people who were writing, and now I'm writing. But it gave me a nudge internally to think I'm envious because a part of me knows that I can do this. It's just in my body that knows it, not my brain. Right.
Did you experience, because I had to Google the difference between envy and jealousy recently.
Probably much better, you'll say much better than my awful example.
That jealousy is a fear of losing something you already have.
Okay.
And that envy is the negative feelings you have about not getting what somebody else got.
Or unfulfilled. I mean, I'd probably just word it differently. For me, I'd say envy is a mirror facing back at you, showing you your own unfulfilled potential.
Yeah. So did it feel negative, though? Did it feel...
Oh, yeah. It felt horrible. Because it felt like you could do this and you're not. You're somehow not taking the right steps in this dance to do this.
That makes perfect sense, because when I see people also in entertainment running that kind of program of envy, they're not envious of people who have something unattainable.
Right.
So they have this competition, this why can't I have that? They don't have that about a professional football player when they're a stand-up comedian. They have it about somebody who got to be on SNL
special or something. Yeah,
something that they couldn't have because that person got there. Yeah, it would be cool to be an NFL person, but I'm not having feelings about that because it isn't. Wow, that's really interesting, because that is exactly... It is something that you could have. It's that belief that because somebody else has it, you can't have it, which is just a program that's not true. And so when other people accomplish things, even when they're things I want, it doesn't register to me at all to be like, how come they got that? Even people I think are less talented, because there's so much more that goes into it than talent. Yes. It's right place, right time. It's connections. It's this was the time for them. Yeah. I think in comedy, especially, people underestimate what is hot right now. It's like, yeah, you're funny. You might be funnier than that person, but you don't have the POV that they're looking for right now. But it never occurs to me if somebody gets like a a Netflix special or something and I want a Netflix special, it would never occur to me to be envious of that, because I would just be like, that's cool. So that's just proof that I can have that. Yes. Because I know that this is an abundant universe.
Yeah.
But we are trained that the possibilities are so small, and scarcity, a belief in scarcity. Money is very similar. The programming around money, and people spend so much time trying to figure out how to scrimp and save and hide away, and they're afraid of it. They're terrified of it, when in reality it's pretend. It's just a made up thing in this game. Rather than spending an hour trying to figure out how to stretch $1, spend an hour thinking about how could you make an extra $1. And you would be amazed at how once you just look for that, all of those things open up and money gets. And then also other programming around money is the fear of money is a wicked one to break. Learning how to spend it helps create more of it.
Right.
Don't yell at me when you max out your credit cards. But like the fear of money creates poverty. The belief that they are going to have money and we are not. I kind of believe that the 1% is incapable of creating their own reality, and that they did this beautiful trick where they get us to believe in their wealth and their power, and just get us to complain about it, and then we create it for them.
Yes, that's right. We're part of the program that makes them have great lives. It feels like, for me, a good opportunity to reinforce about the envy thing. It feels like I'd like to say to people, to you, whose ears we're in right now, to think about what you're envious about. And really, like, listen to your gut, because I really, truly feel all the clues are there. Envy, a lot of people are envious of, say, artistic things. Oh, somebody who can paint. They are musical. They're a writer. They're an actor. I mean, of course, I'm living in LA. But whatever you're envious of, I really do feel it's clues that you have the potential to do that yourself. And start small. Don't make it some gargantuan journey and mountain you've got to climb. For me with writing, like, we're talking over 20 years ago, I started just taking little writing workshops. I haven't been to university, but I've paid attention, and when I'd see little flyers for, writers boot camp and this sort of thing over the years, they've all added up. And then comedy, which I loved. I mean, I still love. I love comedy. And comedy for me didn't make a lot of money. And a lot of the time was a life of poverty. My mother was like, what are you doing? You look like a homeless person when you come and visit me. And I'm like, well, this is my career. And this is what I look like in this career. But sort of the proof of what I'm saying is, randomly out of the blue, I get this invitation from like a major studio to write. And they had found some YouTube videos of me online, which I was almost like, oh my God, this doesn't actually happen. Like this is the equivalent of, Marilyn Monroe being discovered in some shop somewhere, I'm like, this doesn't really happen, but it really did happen. And they're like, oh, we already watched your videos and our team watched. And I'm like, oh my God, executives have been watching these cheesy videos where I'm on YouTube with 3 people in the room and some of these jokes aren't even working. But they're like, yeah, no, we like this and we like you and blah, blah, blah. And it started this tumbling boulder of opportunity. And then, of course, besides the videos, then they asked about me and they're like, well, what are you doing? And of course, I was able to say, well, I've been taking all these writing workshops. I did at UCB, which I love, Groundlings, which I love, and Second City, all these things. And all of this, all of my life that I had loved doing that hadn't earned me money, this sort of comedy, not considerable money. I mean, I was a paid comedian, but we know what that means. Yeah. It means you
money.
It means you can get to your gig and get home and possibly get fed. And so, but all of these things converged to get what to me really was a dream job scenario, and to a lot of other people in LA would be a dream job scenario. But it was born out of chipping away at it really since I was 12 years old and was acting on a stage doing what I loved, which was performing. So I really am such an advocate to really listen to yourself. What is it you love? And there's something wonderful that can be born out of it, whether it's growing seeds, planting things, sowing, just do that craft, that thing that you love. And opportunities, I feel, are born out of that lovely positive energy.
Exactly.
It sounds so hokey dokey when I say that.
No, I know.
It sounds
it's
so
strange.
I'm aware of how hokey dokey that sounded.
But I like this. I like this idea, and I'm running all of these conversations I've had with people struggling with envy through it, and it's exactly that. So if you look at it as a mechanism for the small voice inside you trying to tell you this is what you are made for, and you're just hearing it through the filter of the ego and experiencing it, what a much better way to articulate that to people struggling with it, because envy feels gross and awful.
It's a horrible feeling, but to me, it's a message for you. It's a message for you when you feel envy. In a way, it's hugely positive, because I truly believe that you don't feel envy if you don't have the capability of doing that thing.
Yeah,
then
and that
you
checks
just
out.
then
That
you
checks
just
out.
then you feel a totally different thing than envy. Envy is that feeling in your gut, that horrible feeling of heaviness, that your nose is out of joint. And it's like, envy. It's because you could be doing that, and that's why it feels so bad.
Wow.
That's my belief on it and how I feel about it. I feel if you can't do it, you don't feel envy, like you and the NBA player.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not 7 feet tall. When I watch guys playing basketball, I would not feel envy. I just don't want to do it. But you see what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
If we can't do it, if we don't have the capability to do it, I don't believe we get the feeling of envy. I believe the feeling we get is something else. It might be resentment. It might be a different negative emotion. It might be bitterness. But envy is very specific. It's a certain nasty feeling that kind of creeps into your gut very deeply. And I feel it's the one that's waking you to say, do something.
This is something.
Take some steps.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like that hasn't even sunk in all the way yet, and it's. I love that. I love that. What a way to to instantly change the narrative on envy as well. I mean, yeah, here in LA, it's everywhere. It's a very difficult place to not be envious, because there's a bunch of people working towards the same aims. And I find it's a huge challenge for most people in entertainment to honestly celebrate behind closed doors the victories of their friends even. It's like, that's your friend. How are you not happy for them? How are you running an inventory about why you deserve it more than they do? And what it is that small voice saying you deserve, like, you can do this.
Right.
You should do this.
Right.
That's so interesting.
But you have to be putting the good energy towards it for the right reasons. And people get success, and they may have taken a path that wasn't the nicest, most good and positive path. But I feel if you're positive about it and just doing things, and I think I've said this on other podcasts, like, my life has been in entertainment. My dad was in a band in England. Like, I literally grew up surrounded by Fender amps and alcohol. But I grew up surrounded by what it was like to be an entertainer, and it wasn't pretty at all. So it's sort of shocking that I wanted to do it, but I still was drawn to it. I've done crazy jobs to just be immersed in entertainment. Like in Toronto, I spent a whole year, every single day except Christmas Day and New Year's Day, I worked as a stand-in. Which is really one step up from being an extra. And this was a long time ago. But it was because I'd been cast in a show. And when I got to set, it was a big production. It was a more American production, shooting in Toronto. And I didn't know where to look. There was like 50 crew. I couldn't even tell who the director was. And it was so intimidating. I thought, I'm never going to have this happen again. I'm going to work on crew to learn who all these people are. And so I spent a year as a stand-in, and which is great. I got to hear the director and the producer all day of great big movies and working with actresses. It was really a learning experience. And it just taught me so much. But it was a very humbling sort of a job. But all of those things, I guess what I'm sort of trying to say is that they add up. Whoops-a-daisy, I don't even know what that was. What is that? What is it?
We got a folder next to you.
It's my notebook. Okay. If Karen was here, she'd be like, something made that happen.
Yeah.
But all of these things add up to a lot of experience, that one day the opportunities come and you realize you've done a lot, you've taken a lot of small steps. So
yes.
I just think you've got to be doing the small steps. A lot of people really put a fence around their life by thinking they want it immediately instead of doing the small steps. So I'm a big believer.
And they don't recognize that it's already happening. It's already happening
and stuff could already be in play, but just the little tiny small steps. And I've talked about it in other shows about depression, how you get out of depression. And I'm a big believer there in small steps, like having experienced depression where it's like you can't even move. Reach out and touch something and set the goal in your head of, I'm going to reach out and touch that pen. And the moment you do that, you've started a small straw of regaining control over your life. You've got that piece of cotton of the fabric that you're slowly going to pull to get your life again. You know, me and my analogies.
Oh, same.
So,
same cloth, told you.
Well, I've rambled on about envy and that sort of thing. Is there anything you would love to offer before that you feel
no,
impulse?
I think we covered most of the basics.
Excellent. Okay.
I can't wait to have you on our podcast.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm excited to be on your podcast. Well, thank you so much, Jessa Reed.
Thank you.
And where's the best place for people to go and learn all about you?
The podcast, probably Mormon and the Meth Head.
Okay,
available
great.
Wherever podcasts are.
Excellent.
You can Google Jessa Reed if you want to hear some gross stories that I have on the internet.
Well, I'll make sure I put the links to the brilliant comedy special and all of that stuff on my podcast. So thank you very much for joining
so much.
me. Okay, Jessa Reed, everybody. Jessa Reed, is your mind still intact? Is it blown? I hope so, because if that stuff doesn't blow your mind, I don't know. I mean, alien school. Oh, I loved that conversation with Jessa Reed. It was just awesome. Oh, by the way, a quick word from our sponsor. If you guys need to send cash, money overseas, change currencies, look no further than thegreyescape.com/cash, where I did my research and you can benefit from it by getting the best exchange rate for sending your money around between different countries. And for listening to this show, you can get a free international money transfer valued at up to £500. That's a lot of money. Not so much since Brexit, I won't lie, but still nothing to sniff at. And from what I found, it really is the best exchange rates you can get. So thegreyescape.com/cash for your free transfer. Oh, what an episode. Oh my gosh, small steps, awakenings. Just listening to this episode might be undoing the shackles of some of your programming, nudging you along in your awakening, or not. Maybe you're already awakened. That's fantastic if you are. Either way, I am really grateful that you kept an open mind to listen to this show and that you keep listening to this show. And maybe you'll join me in taking some more small steps towards something you want to do in your life. That's what I'm doing. I'm still picking up that pencil, and I hope you do too. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join me soon right here on The Grey Escape.